May the words of my lips and the meditations of your hearts both be acceptable to God. I'm not going to preach to you about the hat, but this spring I got to lead a course in American history to 1870 at Wayne State. And because it was a spring term, I got used to 3-hour lectures. So I can do it. That makes me a dangerous person to put in front of a microphone in a crowd. So I brought a technical aid to save you and me. Got about 12 minutes here. You may be puzzled about the readings that were chosen for today, and that's okay. But when I was going through the Bible trying to find appropriate verses, I realized once again that the Bible is not a feel-better, happy-good manual. An awful lot of bad stuff is in there. Despair, and talk about cities as whores, and all kinds of unexpected things. But I did want to talk about lessons of the past, and so these two passages are important. They're important for the same reason that I was talking with our young friend down here. The reason we are sitting in a beautiful, elegant American Gothic sanctuary is not because somebody promised to build a beautiful, elegant sanctuary. It's because they actually built the sucker. Okay? We started as a very small congregation back in the 1840s. But a group of people who wanted to have a much more elegant church did a putsch. It was not very kind, but they took that congregation over because there weren't enough Presbyterians in Detroit. There were there to be 3 Presbyterian congregations. There are only 2 authorized. And so our group of proto-millionaires took over the Second Presbyterian Church and built this church right at the edge of the city. We're the city limits church for that time. And we were built by people who were potentially unpleasant. They were pushy. They were nouveau riche, that is, their money had all come just then. They were part of a radical new movement politically. They were Republicans, and some of them were so evil as to be abolitionists. Imagine that. So they built this sanctuary, but it didn't turn out to serve the needs they thought it was going to serve. This is the big surprise here. They built a church for rich, radical, Republican white people who were going to be freeing the blacks and giving people wonderful things and having their own political movement and being millionaires together, and they never in their lives could have pictured you being here today. So this goes to the passage about Peter's dream. Peter's dream is essentially the church becoming not a Levitical Jewish church, but a church for everybody. Peter's dream essentially says, the foods you were prohibited from eating in the past, all those rules are gone. And Peter goes, no way, God, no, I've been an observant Jew my entire life, and nothing unclean has ever passed my lips. Here's the subtext. I am righteous. I am righteous. I'm good. Don't make me eat those bad things. I don't want the porcupines or the pork. Either way, and God is going 3 times. Boy, I'm going to show this to you 3 different times. Everything in here you can kill and eat. Why am I showing this to you? At this moment you think that God is thinking, how dumb are my people? But he's showing him that Peter should eat with the Gentiles. The church should be bigger than religiously observant Levitical Jews. So it's okay to go and eat with the Gentiles, which also means inviting them into your worship, which also means sharing your sacred with them. So the church has to be bigger than just religiously observant, conservative Levitical Jews. It's got to be bigger. Now, I look around at the 65 or 80 of us who gather every Sunday, and I keep thinking to myself, the church has to be bigger. The frozen chosen can't be limited to a mere 70 people every Sunday. And that's what people were thinking historically in this church as well. So I have a couple of documents that I brought today. I have one from 1906. 1906. What was happening in 1906? A lot of stuff was going on, yes. But here in 1906, here's what was happening. The people who lived next door to us in their mansion, because this was the mansion district, chose to sell their house and lot. And 2 people got together in a sneaky way and they bought it. Mrs. Stratton and Mr. Joy. Mrs. Stratton put up $5,000, Mr. Joy put up $5,000, and they bought the lot. And then they came to the church session, and Mrs. Stratton said this: "I hereby indicate my purpose to give to the Fort Street Presbyterian Church $50,000, inclusive of the $5,000 already given by me, for the purpose of building and completing the church house upon the general plans as discussed, upon the single condition that at the meeting to be called at an early date to discuss and act upon this tender, the people shall vote to raise not less than $25,000 and thereafter duly pursue the purpose. The same to be added to the general endowment in order that said church house shall be perpetually assured of adequate maintenance. The work upon said church house to begin as soon as possible after the church has by vote taken the above action." October 1906. More than 100 years ago, guys. But because Mrs. Stratton took action with Mr. Joy, and the church took action rapidly, we built the church house, and you can look at the cornerstone out there and see that it was a year before the dedication happened. Not very long. So they put a big chunk of change into making something physical happen. And you know why Mrs. Stratton wanted a church house? Okay, it was on sound religious principles, but what she really wanted was bathrooms. She wanted adequate sanitary facilities for the youth programs that were going on in the church, and a place for the youth to meet and do things, and for a place for the church to have celebrations that couldn't happen in the sanctuary. But she really wanted bathrooms, and she made it happen. She made it happen. One other document I want to show to you. This is a telegram. Actually, this is a telegram form. This is the original telegram. Think of it as being slow Twitter. But this telegram is from Reverend Pence, Reverend Edward Pence, who had served this church back at the turn of the last century. Boy, that sounds strange to say. And was called back to serve it again in the 20s. Called back by an eager congregation. And they told Reverend Pence that they needed him back to grow the church. And they needed him back, and if he came back, he would have fantastic assets to work with. There were thousands and tens of thousands in the Joy estate that he could work with to grow the church. And this is what Reverend Pence said. October 30th, 1927, to his wife, Jessie. "Have accepted to a remarkable group of men and women this afternoon an irresistible challenge to all the courage and faith in me. Pray and pack. Will wire en route arrival. Ed." This is the act of a person who is not promising and not fulfilling. And it's not the act of a church that was promising and not fulfilling. It's the very real, put the pedal to the metal, commitment in faith of one of our historic figures. Now, these are just two examples that came from the collection that Buttico Hathaway had. But these are the real documents, the real deal. This is a direct connection with our history. These are primary sources. These are not some stories told by a positivist who wants us to be the exclusive, wonderful church that always does only good things. These are the real things that have happened. And guess what? More real things have happened. History didn't stop in the 20s. I joined this church in the early 80s. I joined just after an amazing, committed effort had been made by the people in this church to renovate the Donlin Room and to install an elevator for handicap access. That was a huge project. Jeff Callis remembers that project. It made the church accessible. It made it fit the laws to come. It made it possible for hundreds of people to use the church and for membership to grow. There was another huge commitment in history back in the 90s. Oh, who remembers that time? When we renovated that church house. We took money out of the church accounts to renovate it, $300,000, put in air conditioning, painted it, for heaven's sakes, did all kinds of cool things, so that more programs and people could go on. Shortly after we took the money out, the markets caved in and our funds collapsed. So if we hadn't taken the money out on that venture for the church house, we would have lost about half of it, and the market collapsed that happened afterwards. God makes different things happen than we expect. Now that church house is not serving a population of air-conditioned, happy suburbanites who are just down there to enjoy their church. It's got bathrooms. It's got overnight visitors staying there. It's catering to the things that make this church function. It's a living, breathing asset. envisioned by people in history, historically renovated, and now our responsibility today. So we have to be thankful for these huge things that were done in the church. We have to be grateful to the people in history, even if their vision might have been limited. Even if they originally were the millionaire church. Why are there numbers on your pews? Has anybody wondered that? Probably a few of you know, but your pews are numbered because when this church was new, you didn't just go to church. You didn't get in unless you rented pew space. I have a letter in my collection, again, from Motico's collections, from a person coming in from out of town writing to a church member saying, I understand you may have tickets for the 4th Street Presbyterian Church. May I get 4? Okay? They checked at the door to see if you had a ticket. That's not the church of today. We can't be grateful for the limits, but we can be grateful for what they built. They never expected we'd be serving the homeless here. They never thought of that. And yet that's what this church has been great at for the last 40 years. Never expected that we'd be moving pews and bringing in the public for concerts of Handel's Messiah here. But that's what the church has been great at. What we're doing today is not based on the promises that they made, but on what we have done with the projects that they did. Now, this church can continue to be great if we look at our history but are not bound up by it. So we need to be, like Peter, dreaming, perhaps confused about what's happening, but aware that what we do to grow this church, thankfully, abundantly, depends on us being willing for God to use it for a different purpose than we necessarily think of right now. You have to have the establishment for the good to happen, but you can't dictate what's good in the future. God will. There will always be surprises. There may be loud rock music someday, now that rock is old. There may be different kinds of parties. There are people coming in to get married here who don't belong to this congregation. Oh my, oh my. A disaster in the past, a hope for the future for us today. Because when enough people come in here and see this marvelous facility, they will come and join this marvelous facility. So be thankful for the past, and when you're thinking about stewardship, realize you don't know where your dollars are going, but they are sure going to go to good.